For all the talk that Democrats could have a presumptive nominee come Super Tuesday, Elizabeth Warren is saying very clearly, not so fast, friends. Listen to Warren at her CNN town hall last night.
The way I see this is you write the rules before you know where everybody stands, and then you stick with those rules.
To be clear, would you continue your fight for the Democratic nomination even if another candidate arrived at the convention ahead of you in the delegate count?
Yes.
You would continue. Why?
Because a lot of people made $5 contributions to my campaign to keep me in it.
Just as they all continue this final sprint to South Carolina's primary on Saturday, here with me for some answers, some real answers. Former Executive Director of the Congressional Black Caucus, Angela Rye, and former South Carolina State Representative Bakari Sellers, both CNN political commentators. Okay, friends, Angela, what does this declaration from Elizabeth Warren, what does it mean for the race? I mean, it's an answer.
It is an answer, and I think it's a good one. And here's why. It's not just for the folks who donated $5 to her campaign. It's folks that want to see a real contest. I think for too long, Democrats have been used to deciding who the presumptive nominee should be, and things fall out accordingly. I have a lot of friends who are superdelegates, so it's no shade to superdelegates. But for a long time, the people had to follow the will of the superdelegates instead of the other way around. And I think also it's still really early. Even after South Carolina this weekend, it's still very early. We still have Super Tuesday and a bunch of other contests. And to put this in perspective, Democrats need 1,991 delegates to win the nomination. And right now, the top contender is Bernie Sanders, and he has 45. So I just want to make sure people have that kind of understanding.
1,445.
No, that's 45. So I think that is our reality.
And speaking of Bernie Sanders, he shared a similar position 4 years ago that you hear from Elizabeth Warren.
Absolutely.
And now he's big on a plurality rather than a majority when it comes to the delegate count. Bakari, Joe Biden knows that he needs to win South Carolina. You're on the ground there. He very well may win South Carolina. But with that in mind, I want to read for you what he said last night about others in the race and where things stand at the moment. He said, "How do you stay in if you have demonstrated you can't get any African-American support? How do you stay in if you don't get support in South Carolina? You have Warren saying she's taking this all the way to the convention. That is not what Joe Biden is very clearly saying here. Which is more likely to play out?"
Well, I actually agree with Joe Biden. I think that he was talking directly to Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, not necessarily Elizabeth Warren.
Really?
But the fact is, if you can't build a coalition, if you can't build a coalition, and that coalition consists of African-American voters, and you have to be able to do that and show that in South Carolina, then really what are you doing? I mean, I think it's time that we get serious about who's going to be the nominee. I think it's very clear that these lanes are closing in, and although we have a long way to go, I think that we are starting to see that it's a Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders race, and that's just where we are. Elizabeth Warren and everyone, they have every right to stay in. Now, should they, or is this some ego trip? That's a question they have to be responsive to, but I make no hesitation about it. Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, when they come to South Carolina, if they get between 0 and 2 or 3% of the African-American vote, there's really no need for them to continue, because you cannot be the Democratic nominee without showing that you can actually have some African-American support.
I can't in good conscience put Amy Klobuchar with Pete Buttigieg. And the reason for that is Pete Buttigieg at least has double digits in the delegate count, while Amy Klobuchar does not. And so I think that this is the danger in a primary. This is not me being biased to one candidate over another, although I will clearly say on here I'm definitely not an Amy Klobuchar fan. And I think that the reality of it is there are some people who are, and they should have the right to vote for people who they're interested in. That is what a primary contest is about, and whether Democrats who are, party beholden or not see that. It is so important for us to engage a new generation of voters by being honest about what democracy really is, and the best people to reflect what democracy really is probably have some Democrats in the name. There's a thought.
Okay, let me play for you. Joe Biden clearly, as he's going and as he moves forward, is clearly trying to dent the front runner, Bernie Sanders. And last night at the town hall, here's was the pitch that he made last night. Listen to this.
It's not about a revolution. It's about results. It's about results. Bernie's a great guy. But Bernie, and he's pricked the conscience of the country. It's really important. But Bernie, in all the time he's been in the United States Senate, I think he's passed 7 or 8 bills.
That is very similar to what Elizabeth Warren, the argument she made on the debate stage. Bakari, are you hearing that that is convincing? Because that seems to be a reoccurring theme in terms of the hit on Bernie Sanders right now.
Well, I think now this is the first time, and people forget. I know Bernie Sanders has been running for president for, 4, 5, 6 years, but people forget this is the first time that Bernie Sanders is the front runner. And so he's now taking all of this incoming from all sides. And now he's going to have to deal with that. He's going to have to explain his record. Joe Biden had his time in the barrel, and now it's Bernie Sanders' time in the barrel. I think that a lot of these issues that are coming up, whether or not he was an effective legislator or he was not an effective legislator, are issues that are going to, resonate with various voters. Here in South Carolina, though, it's a trust factor. And with black voters particularly, we know the value, and we worked extremely hard to achieve some semblance of success in this country, and some of the rights that we had to fight and bleed for. We're not going to risk that on ineffectiveness and risk losing that on ineffectiveness. And so it's a strong message. Will it win out today? Probably so, but we'll see Saturday.
We will see. I love that. Let's just leave it there, because then none of us have to make a prediction. Good to see you, Bakari. Good to see you, Angela. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.